Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on transportation of sterile medical devices and the testing of those. We have a number of different presentations in relation to this subject. What we're going to stick basically to the transportation on today. So we also have a number of different sites around the world. Myself from the Galway site, and Nate Wilhelm is the manager from the packaging testing services in the US. You can see we have our main site here in Galway and the other site in Brooklyn Park in the USA. So in relation to the actual products and package testing that we provide in relation to medical device packaging, we provide services such as likes of accelerated and real-time aging, distribution and transportation simulation testing, cold chain testing, sterile barrier integrity and seal string testing, medical device equipment testing, extractables, leachables, design verification, lure connectors, and accelerated lifestyle testing, or life cycle testing, I should say. But the purpose of today's test is in relation to packaging and how you validate that. But before we start looking at the tests that are involved, you need to understand what the purpose of packaging is. And when you're looking at packaging, there are really only 5 main purposes of a package and what it does. So basically, it's there to contain the actual product in the either primary and or secondary packaging. To inform you what's in it, it must be labeled, and the label must be clearly legible, so as you know what you're getting in the box, basically. To protect the product to the point of use. And the point of use can either be at a clinical trial site, at a doctor's surgery, in a theatre. It can be absolutely any place. Again, you need to be able to ensure that the product remains intact and sterile to that point of use. To display the product in its best way for its user. So basically, if you're in a surgery or in an operating theatre, the nurse or the doctor must be able to look into the package to see what they're actually getting, or be able to distinguish what they're getting from the outside of the packaging, so they're not destroying sterile barriers before use. And last but not least, to transfer from the point of manufacture out to the retailer, to the warehouse, to the storage location, and again to the point of consumption. It must be able to retain good product out to that. There are a number of challenges there in doing this, and how you address those challenges. So you need to design safe packaging that will protect the product during the shipment and transport, and again, as I said, out to the point of use. The second challenge is in specifying which tests are applicable to the performance of this testing to meet the regulatory requirements. Typically, what's used for medical devices is ISO 11607. Parts 1, and within that you have Annex B, which basically outlines there's 123 standards listed in there. But for distribution type testing, you have ASTM D4169, ASTM D7386, and also ISTA 3A and ISTA 3E standards. All very good standards and all used at different levels by different companies. But again, it's up to you to decide which standard that you're actually going to use, and you must justify that based on the risk of to the actual products. In most companies, I won't say all, because I know in most companies that packaging is often considered the poor relation. And the reason for this is because they put all their time and effort into designing the product, which is absolutely fair enough. But when the product gets to the end of the line, how do you get it out to the user, out to the point of use? And testing is used to manage the risks inherent in the manufacturing process to the point of use, and distribution process, of course. As I said, it's often seen as a necessary evil until something happens and there's a recall on the packaging, or you get complaints from your customers, and all of a sudden there's a very large budget appears for the actual packaging to be redesigned and start the whole process again of revalidating, which is quite common. it's not seen as value add. And if you look at the little graphic down the left or the right hand side there in relation to the different phases and the costs involved, these are guesstimate costs. So if you get it at very early design phase, it's going to cost you very little. But if it's at a customer site where you find an issue, it's going to cost significant amount of money to actually address the issues. As I said, the risks need to be defined and assessed in relation to the packaged product. This is the combination of occurrence of harm and the severity of that harm that can occur due to failures. Okay, so typical examples of where you'd actually look at your risk and carrying out your risk is during the process itself, when the product is being made and packaged. The packaging itself, the handling of it within the manufacturing facility or storage facility, the transportation and distribution, as I said, the storage area, where it's going to be stored, is it local, is it international, or where is it? The integrity of the packaging, and I also need to assess if altitude is going to be an issue for that. These issues or risks must be assessed to determine when and why failures may occur. In relation to doing that or not doing that risk assessment, what are the issues there? You're not going to have the correct packaging, basically, not having a clear idea on what testing is required, not knowing how many samples to use. That is actually one of the most quite often used or asked questions that we get. How many samples, and why do we have to use that amount of samples? Again, that goes back to your risk assessment and the confidence and reliability of the actual packaged product that you want to achieve. Again, you can have product put on hold, delays in launch of a product, or worst case, where a product is recalled, where your regulatory body has defined that there hasn't been enough testing performed or enough samples tested to justify inclusion in their system. If you look at the example on screen, this is typically what a whole testing process looks like throughout the likes of ISO 11607. So if your design qualification, your installation qualification, operation qualification, and process or performance qualifications, and the different tests that are done at different levels. So typically at OQ, you'd start with a seal strength testing. And then at PQ, you'd add in package integrity to that seal string testing, because all you're doing at the OKQ stage is basically establishing the seal strength for your packaging and establishing the minimum or the nominal seal area. When you look at, say, the likes of the process qualification, you're going to use the data that's actually generated at this level right throughout the lifetime of the actual packaged product, out to the end of the real-time aging of the product, again, which is establishing your shelf life. Again, you also should look at doing your device validation throughout the whole process as well. What you're need to establish at this stage then is what you're actually going to be testing. Is it at a pallet level? Is it a box level? And what you're trying to prove in relation to the actual packaged product in there. Are you looking at, say, the likes of the syringe in the packaging itself? Which of those is actually the sterile barrier? Is it the outer packaging, or is it the syringe? And again, it's up to you to decide on what that is, because it could be either or both. And again, that's a decision that has to be made by you as the owner of the actual product. The one thing you don't want to get to is a situation where you have a box arriving to a customer site that looks something like the picture in on screen at the moment, because you're only achieving partial successes, which is not sufficient to get the product to the market or to its end user in an acceptable condition. And the question you need to ask there is, will it perform reliability for its expected lifetime? And in this instance, it absolutely did not. Package testing, so distribution testing is what we're going to look at. Up to a number of years ago, if you look at the graphic that's on the bottom, animation on the bottom of the picture, you'll see a truck and an airplane and a ship. That's what companies used to do. They used to load up a container of product, ship it from A to B, then fly it to someplace else, and then put it in a ship, and then bring it back to the original manufacturing location and assess it. very expensive, very long. Whereas like alpha distribution testing can take up to a couple of weeks to do. This will take months and months. Some companies still do this type of testing, which would be lane verification, more so in the pharmaceutical side than the medical device side. Again, the distribution testing itself is very cost effective because you only have a very limited number of packages to test, and it results in reduced field returns, reduced damaged product, and you can compare products and processes. If you make a change to your packaging, you can easily assess it by doing a number of very quick tests. So if we look at the standards that are involved, typically within ISO 11667, there are the ISTA standards. There are a number of them there that are listed. Typically, ISTA 2A has been excluded from that. So now you have ISTA 3A, ISTA 3E, the typical ones used for product and package testing. Or if you have cold chain type products, you look at the ISTA 7 series of tests. For the distribution side, again, on the ASTM side, you have both the D4169 and 7386 for small parcels. Or you also have the likes of ISO 4180, which is rarely used, but it references a lot of different standards that are referenced or have been referenced in the ASTM and ISTA standards. When you're doing your testing, you need to choose a typical test configuration and test level that you're actually going to use. So you need to choose the worst case packaging configuration and what is that going to be. So typically the worst case would normally be the lowest level that you can actually ship the product at. Is that a shipper box level? Is it a pallet level? Is it a product box level? And does that go into an envelope? And is it tested at that level? Again, instead, if you take, say, the likes of the shipper box, you can have a totally full box or a partial shipment. Again, these are two definite worst case scenarios. And again, you need to decide which you're going to do and what level you're going to test at. If we look at D4169, it gives you different test levels. So level 1 is a high level of intensity, but has a low probability of occurrence. Level 3 is the direct opposite, in that it has a low level of intensity, but a very high probability of occurrence. And mostly what's used is level 2, which is in between those two extremes. But again, it's up to you as the user of the standard to decide which you're actually going to use. In relation to the standards themselves, ASTM D4169 is what I call an umbrella standard. You have a lot of different standards in there, and you have a lot of choices that you can make or can be made depending on the testing that you're trying to do. So you have different standards, so like for conditioning, the ASTM D4332, handling D5276, compression testing or stack testing to D642, altitude testing 6653, vehicle vibration 4728. The list goes on and on and on, depending on what type of testing that you're actually trying to do. In the standard itself, you have 18 different distribution cycles, and the most typically ones that are used will be distribution cycle 13 for small packages or single shippers, distribution cycle 6 for unitized loads or palletized product, and distribution cycle 12 for large packages or unitized loads or palletized products. One that's starting to become more prevalent is distribution cycle 2, where you can actually design and develop your own sequence of tests. So if you have a particular issue that's been noted with a product, or you want to change the sequences within the distribution cycles that are listed, you can do that using distribution cycle 2. So it allows you to choose what testing is done and how it's done. Typically looking at the actual schedules themselves of the different tests. So you have from test schedule A to J, which lists all the different types of tests. So you have your handling, which covers both manual and mechanical. You have stacking, vehicle stacking, stacked vibration, vehicle vibration, loose load, rail switching, environmental hazards. The list goes on. And the last two there, Schedule I and Schedule J, are still optional tests, and they depend on the packaging that you're actually using. So if we look at the conditioning of packaging beforehand, most products will be shipped through different temperatures and humidity levels. So for the likes of ISTA, they would have a specific set of temperatures that you can actually run through. But again, that will depend on the product and the packaging that you are actually testing and what the limitations of that product and packaging is. Our ASTM has the same thing, and both standards are very, very similar. So if the likes of the frozen winter or ambient condition, ISTA goes down as far as -29, ASTM goes down as far as -30, but in ASTM you can still go down as far as -55. That's listed in D4332 as well. You have the ambient, which is typically 23 degrees, 50% humidity, tropical wet at 40 degrees, 90 or 38, 85, and desert dry again, are both the same thing. The one thing that's fairly common in both of them, that it states that the conditions that you can expose the product to is up to 72 hours. But it doesn't give you a definition. So if you were to basically go through all of those exposures to the different temperatures and humidity levels, it could take you up to 15 days to do the actual conditioning cycle itself. Whereas if you have, say, previous history on the product, you can use that duration to establish your conditioning cycle. Or alternatively, you can do an equilibrium study, which will look at the duration it takes the product and packaging to reach the temperatures that it's actually been exposed to in the environmental test chamber. As I said, the one thing you do need to look at there is the materials that are in the packaged product. In relation to one of the main ones here, which is TG, or your glass transitioning temperature. This is the temperature at which the polymers transition from a soft rubbery state to a rigid glassy state, and vice versa. It is reversible. If you go to TM, which is the melt temperature, it's not reversible because it will actually lose its shape. Similar to the graphic or the picture there on the bottom right-hand side, you're seeing what was a casing for a product, and you can see the red line indicates how straight it was when it went in, and when it came out after a number of hours, it wasn't so straight and couldn't be used as a case. Again, as a worst case, you'll see design pitfalls, again looking at that glass transitioning point not being known, or the melt point for the actual products there on the two pictures on the left-hand side. It took longer to actually clean out the chambers after doing the testing than it did to actually cause the melting of the product in the first place. Same thing if you look at the likes of corrugated shippers. If you don't have the correct adhesive in the shippers in the manufacturing joint, again, the level of humidity can cause the shippers to start to fall apart over a long period of time. Also, if you're shipping in a cold environment, you need to have the correct adhesive spec for that. Where that if you're shipping at say below -30, you need to have an adhesive that's going to work at that level. In relation to drop tests, if you can lift something, you can drop it. And it will fall, it will get damaged. Gravity is a great thing, it does work. And you can do both manual and mechanical handling under this particular test. It's typically a free fall impact, and also use rotational edge or rotational drops, depending on the type of test that you're actually using. Typically, the damage to the product can be cosmetic in relation to the packaging, but it also can cause functional failures to the actual product itself. Again, it's covered by all of the different standards to different levels. Typical drop sequence, basically you start at the most fragile corner and work your way around the box. Under ASTM D4169, there are 2 drop sequences defined within the actual test itself, each of them having 6 different drops. Looking at the video here that's just about to play, you can see a typical drop test on a corner of a box. This is a dummy box that I made up with some samples in it. You can see into the box, you can see what's happening to the product. But typically, as I said, this can be cosmetic damage. And the picture in the bottom middle, which shows you the corner damage to the actual shipper box itself. But if that's transferred into the product box and further into the actual packaging or the main packaging or primary packaging, is that going to cause an issue? Is the cosmetic damage an issue for you as well? For some companies, absolutely it is. For others, not so much. Other typical effects of drop testing will be the actual product coming out through the packaging itself. It's typical splitting of the shippers, tape opening, and on the primary packaging where you're getting holes through the actual packaged product itself. And again, it is fairly typical, depending on the packaged product and what's in there, and how good the packaging is supposed to be, and what cushioning levels are in there. And again, other typical effects of drop, say double pouched products, where you'd have a corner within a pouch and it's hitting the chevron, the red circled area there on the left hand side, basically the inner pouch trying to work its way through the actual chevron. Or in relation to the defect on the right hand side, again, it's right through a foil pouch, and you can see other stippling that's covered in that area as well. Compression testing. To me, this is a very significant test in that it's a health and safety factor, because if you have a box level or a pallet that's stacked 10 or 15 high, and you put another pallet on top of it, what's going to happen to the bottom boxes? To establish what this is, it's best for you to do some homework up front, so you know what loads the box must be able to actually hold. So by doing a very simple McKee simplified calculation for your box compression test, I have a table there which typically looks at a standard size box, which was 393 by 333 width, with the various different fluting levels. You can see that there's a significant difference in the compression load that the box can handle, basically from 450 kg down to 41 kg is what the actual calculation would be. But this is only a theoretical calculation, and it doesn't replace the actual testing, because again, you can get totally different results based on the way the product has been exposed to temperature and humidity. And again, as I said, there's a significant danger of collapse. And there's a number of different test types that you can actually do. So the likes of the warehouse testing, basically, which is a static test, or you have in your distribution what happens in the back of a truck, basically. You can do compression under vibration as well. Typically what it does, the corrugate is it's affected by the atmospheric conditions, how the cartons are manufactured, how they're handling, what age they are. And also, if you look at the picture on the right hand side, sorry, you have, say, a typical light product on the bottom and a typical very, very, very heavy product on top, which is not supposed to be that way. But that is quite often what you see happening with couriers when they're transporting the product. There is a number of different methods within the standards of calculating the compressive load as well, in relation to the actual tests or doing the tests. So typically you can choose either of these. So you have for a shipper or identical shippers in a unit on a pallet, you can choose a compressive load there with the top formula, which is very simplified formula. Or if you're doing a less than load or single shipper, or as packaging a small package in the distribution environment, you need to look at doing this the formula in the bottom of the page. One thing that you need to notice or take note of is the latest version of the ASTM D4169 standard has changed the shipping density factor from 160 kilograms per meter squared to 192 kilograms per meter squared. That's basically an increase of 20% of the calculated load. There's also a graphic in there to help you establish how the product is shipped. So it's basically asking you, is the package always shipped in a known distribution environment that prevents double stacking, or is a small package? If it's no, what is the vehicle stack height if it's known? If it's not known, you use a stack height of 2.7 meters or 108 inches. And if it is known, you can reduce that to 1.4 meters or 54 inches, or use a specific vehicle height if that is known either. Again, looking at basics like stacking product on a pallet, how is it done and what gives you the most reliable way of stacking a box on a pallet. Typically, these would be the main 5 types of stacking or stacking methods. So on A, you have a typical column stack. B, you have a cross stack pallet. C, you have a pinwheel. D, you have a typical brick built pallet. And E is a split row pallet. There's only one of them that will give you the maximum capability of the actual stacked product, and that is in method A. And the reason for that is because you have vertical corners over vertical corners and vertical edges over vertical edges. Because if you don't have that, what you can happen is that you can have or reduce the load bearing capability of the shipper boxes by up to 50%. The disadvantage of the column stack is that it's not as stable as the other methods. But if you're wrapping that product in packing film or stretch wrap, that's not going to make much of a difference anyways, because you're adding stability to the actual pallet itself. And again, what you don't want to end up is a situation where you get boxes that come into you that look like the picture on the right hand side, where there's absolutely nothing left there. The other area that you need to take care of is the design of the shipper box. If you're designing, say, the likes of a pizza box or any type of box, if the fluting is in the wrong orientation within the corrugate, you're fighting a losing battle, basically, because what's going to happen is if the fluting is a horizontal, it's going to basically collapse like an accordion. Whereas it must be in the vertical orientation to give you the maximum strength of the box. But again, looking at the picture on the right hand side, it doesn't matter if it's overloaded, what orientation the fluting is in if it's not shipped correctly. Typical examples of the effects of compression is where the box actually totally collapses. And a lot of times there are reasons for this. One of the main ones would be that the box is not sufficiently strong to actually hold what products are in there based on the weights that have been put in there, or the box is badly assembled in that the vertical sides are not actually vertical, they're off to a particular degree. And that's all down to when the box is actually manufactured. And that can cause lots of issues, so the likes of the box splitting open, or you can get punctures in the actual product itself in the primary packaging. The picture in the middle there shows a pallet that arrived in for test. It had already been exposed to high loads, and it actually basically started to compress itself. So it was pointless in doing the actual testing because it would fail, so that the product was returned to the customer. In relation to vibration testing, if I jump up and down here in my office here at home, you will eventually get the effects of the vibration because it's transferred through solids, no matter where you are. So if you look at, say, like a pallet or a product box, the vibration that gets, if it's sitting in the back of a truck or an airplane or a train or wherever it may be, it's a very complex and dynamic stress, and you can get resonance frequencies within the actual product and the packaging, which can actually destroy each other. So you need to have a look at an assessment of that as well. Typical effects of vibration are on the closures and on the contents. They've been combined in recent years into different types of test. So you're getting a certain percentage of the test time at a high level, a certain percentage at medium, and certain at low. So as you're getting a vibration which is across the entire spectrum, so as you're making sure that the product and package can actually withstand that. If you look at the video here, again, the same box that we dropped earlier, you can actually see the product being vibrated through a random vibration. So you can see the product inside is actually bouncing up and down as it's actually going through. That can be there for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, whatever you decide, or what is defined within the standard. If you're looking for a particular issue with a product, you can look at actually doing a lot longer. I've seen some companies doing up to 24 hours vibration because they want to simulate what's happening to the packaged product during the distribution cycle. Again, what's going to happen to the internals? The IFU is probably one of the biggest causes of issues that we see in packaged product, in that it used to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pages long. Latest one that I've seen, I think it's 400 or 500 pages in it. Absolutely crazy when you're trying to put that into a packaged product that is quite fragile, and you can see the effects of it there on the top left hand side, where the corner of the IFU actually went through the actual box itself, or the pouch itself. You also have the opposite, which is the product trying to escape, basically trying to get out through the packaging as well, and that's in the other 2 pictures there on the left hand side. The box on the right hand side is where the corrugated box was gone through a top-loaded vibration, and you can see that the fluting is actually in a horizontal direction, and the box starts to collapse from the bottom up. So again, design of the actual box and how that's put together is very important. Low pressure testing. Again, this is very important to be able to look at and understand what is required here. A lot of people think that altitude is only applicable to air freight, and that is absolutely not the case. If you're driving a truck over a high mountainous area, and it doesn't even have to be a high mountainous area, or you're driving your car over a high area, your ears will start to pop. That's the effects of altitude. So if you basically have a non-breathable pouch that has air in it, that package can actually blow up like a balloon, and it can burst the pouches. It creates seal leaks or bottle leaks, and it also has the likes of blistering or tearing off the labels, where the labels start to peel off by themselves. It's not required where you have, say, the likes of porous packaging, like the likes of Tyvek or paper. They are fine because they reach that pressure equilibrium very, very quickly during the actual transportation of the product. Typical examples again, and the effects of altitude are where the box actually splits open or breaks the tape. The one in the top middle there was actually where a product actually came out through the shipper box and totally destroyed the shipper box. If your courier sees that and gets that in during their transportation, what are they going to do? They're going to wrap it in their tape and they're going to deliver it, which wouldn't look good for you as the company that's supplying the product when it comes in wrapped in DHL or FedEx or TNT tape, whatever the case the courier may be. The picture on the bottom center there is actually a plastic bag, basically. It's typically the size, it was an A4 size sheet when it went in there. But again, when you apply the vacuum to it to simulate the altitude, you can see what happens to it. It blows up totally like a balloon, and it creates stress areas within the packaging. The same as doing a burst test on a package, and it may burst along these stress lines. So again, you need to understand what's happening with that packaging. Typically, you probably all have seen it when you're going in an airplane, when they serve you food these days. This is actually from a picture from 2018 in Malaysia, where served lunch on the plane, and this is how the roll came out. Lovely pillow effect on the actual on the package itself. Concentrated impact is another. This is one of the optional, the second one of the optional tests, along with altitude test. Basically, what this does, it simulates hitting one box hitting off your product box, we'll say, the corner and what it's going to do to your shipper box. It's only applicable currently under the standards, which may change if your corrugated board has a burst strength of less than 275 pounds per square inch, or an edge crush test value of less than 44 pounds per square inch. It's applicable also for plastic wrapped product or packages, and also for unitized loads, the likes of palletized product. What you need to look at there is the actual the way you're shipping the product, and the actual specs for the actual corrugated board within the shipper box itself, because you can end up in a situation where the load that's actually been dropped onto it is basically a 63-gram weight that's either dropped vertically onto the top of the box or swung, as is in the diagram on the right-hand side, from approximately 1 meter into the actual side of the box or the pallet. And again, it's up to you to actually know that the actual specs of your materials. With the current move towards sustainability, a lot of companies are moving towards recycled corrugate, and these, in a lot of cases, have shown to be very, very weak, and they actually allow that weight, when it's either dropped onto it or swung into it, to actually go through the shipper box and damage the product inside. So great care needs to be taken on that you're getting the right product, the right packaging. In the small video there, what you're seeing is the weight being actually dropped down onto a shipper box from the top. So you can see it's quite a small weight, and it does have a fairly large impact on that shipper box. That was a good, strong corrugate, but you can see the indentation that it's still getting in there. And again, if that's going to go through the packaging, what's going to happen there? If you're looking at the effects of the concentrated impact, if you do get a hole through the packaged product or the corrugated board, is that a pass or a fail? Something we're not allowed to say, by the way, but we can only tell you that it's gone through it or hasn't. But again, it's up to you to make that decision. So if it's just giving you an indentation on the corrugate, that's possibly not going to be an issue. If you have, say, aged corrugate, and the board stored in a very low relative humidity area, the picture on the right basically shocked me when I seen it first, because the board actually cracked. In that it actually split the whole board across, and I could actually push my finger through the corrugate quite easily in a different location of the box. The issue where this does become an issue is where the product or the weight that's actually dropped on it or swung into it goes through all the layers of the packaging and damage the primary layer or the primary package. But again, that's totally up to you to decide what that is and how that's accepted, and where and what your sterile barrier is. And that's where it's very important to understand what your primary sterile barrier is. Pallet testing. Again, it's the easiest way to transport a product, because the rest of the products protect it around it, depending on the size and the shape of the actual product, of course. If you have multiple boxes on a pallet, it's very easy to do a test on it called an incline impact test, which actually tests the stability of the palletized product. And all you're doing basically is placing it onto a platen and roll it down a particular slope at a particular speed and hitting into a wall. And this simulates what happens in, say, shunting in the back of a truck, or the forklift handler actually coming along and hitting into another or pallet of product. So again, it's a very good way to assess the stability of your packaging on the product. There's also the edge drop test, or rotational edge drop test for palletized product. Again, what you're doing, you're assessing the stability of the packaged product, and to see how well it's going to maintain or retain the product on the pallet. Again, if you're looking at doing that and the product starts to move, what are the issues there? How do you fix that? And what is acceptable? Can you allow for, say, some slight overhang, or is that not allowed? To me, that would be an absolute no-no, for a very simple reason, that you've once the product moves off the side of the pallet, you've lost the compressibility of it, because you're no longer transferring the load down from the top of the pallet down through the boxes onto the pallet. You're now going into open air on the edge of the box. So typically what's done in this test is the product is raised up to 6 inches and supported, raised higher on the opposite side, and then dropped, and see what typically happens. We also have, say, the likes of moving the product around the place, which the pallet pickup obstacle course. This actual standard is currently in review and will be changing. There will be additional obstacles added into it, and it'll probably take 6 or 8 months to get that through, but we're working on that at the moment, and the course may change as well. But all you're doing is skin testing the stability of the actual palletized product. Acceptance criteria is probably one of the biggest things here, in relation to the whole packaged product system. What are the acceptance criteria? I, as a test lab, can't tell you what that. The standards can't tell you that. The AST MD 4169 standard does actually state that criteria 1, the product must be damage free. Criteria 2, the package is intact. And criteria 3, both criteria 1 and 2 are applicable. Again, for sterile barrier systems, this is an absolute must. It must be actually looked at. But if you do get any of the defects that are shown within the slides, what can you do? What if the packaging does not meet the requirements? For example, in the drop test, the packaging tape breaks, the manufacturer's joint opens, the corrugated board splits, you get indentations in the corner edges. Again, you need to be able to look at this from a risk perspective, and basically put in the risks, or address the risks in the packaging itself. Or do you actually change the corrugated board and start over? Do you reduce the drop height? Or do you justify meeting your requirements based on your risk assessment? There's lots of ways of doing it. The same thing in relation to the compression test. For example, the example I gave of the A-fluted board, which is a 450 kg theoretically calculated box compression load. The calculation within the standard, based on a 2.7 meter height, was 410 kg, but the actual load that was reached by the box itself might only be, say, 210 kg. What do you do then? Again, the same questions apply. Do you reduce the stack height, change the corrugated board, prevent the pallet from being double stacked, or justify, again, based on your risks or the risk to the product, the actual meeting requirements? Again, for the pallet test, again, the same thing applies. What happens if the pallet breaks, which is quite common when you're looking at the likes of palletized product through the distribution cycle. What happens if the load falls off the pallet? Or what we see sometimes is when the courier brings in the pallet of product and it's upside down. The pallet is on top and the box are sitting on the floor, or possibly on another pallet. What happens if the load shifts? Again, you need to justify that within your own internal manufacturing and packaging process areas.